wait, sir? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to call for reconvene on our budget workshop meeting. And not sure where our agenda is for that, but I guess I'm deferring to you, Mr. Cameron, or to Ms. Laurie.
Well, Ms. Laurie is going to be doing the actual presentation. We worked very hard on this budget. There's been some substantial challenges, and things still continue to be in a bit of a flux. And this budget could be impacted by two things. Number one is if, in fact, we do the building on Bings, then that could potentially, depending on how we decide to pay for it, impact the budget. And the other is that I do not, unfortunately, have a resolution with regard to the sheriff's temporary solution, which, if we have to go out for rented space, would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to cover that for that 2-year period. So just bear in mind that Laurie has worked really hard to constrain. Department heads have submitted cost savings to us. We worked very, very hard to contain cost. We want to have a budget that is physically responsible, and it is the goal to do a millage rate reduction, if possible. If worst case scenarios come up with regard to these other two issues that we have, we may be constrained on that. We are going to have to ask our constitutional officers to go back and look and see what savings would they could possibly come up with, because we just need to get through what's going to be a tough budget year. And with that, I ask Laurie to do the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Laurie Bailey Brown, Financial Services Director. Welcome, everyone, to our second workshop for the fiscal year 20 budget. I'm just going to jump right in. Basically, today we're going to give a status update of where we're at, and we're focused again on general fund for these budget workshops. We had a workshop on May 6th, which delivered an overview of the general fund. We talked about where the revenues come from for the general fund, which is primarily your property taxes, 75%. And we talked about the expenditures of the general fund and some history. Today's meeting is focused on the progress, where we're at. When we met on May 6th, we were still wrapping things up. We got a lot of things wrapped up to see where we're at from the BOCC's budget. We also, on Friday, received from our constitutionals their requested budgets for next year. We've got one more meeting scheduled on June 17th. That's your next regular scheduled commission meeting at 5 o'clock. We'll have a 1 p.m. workshop. We'll take that opportunity to take you from where we are today to hopefully a wrap-up. And then you have one regular scheduled meeting on July 15. There's only one meeting in the month of July. At that meeting, we'll be presenting to you the proposed budget for next year with the millage rate that you'll be expecting to see. And we'll be hopefully setting the trim at that meeting as well. If we don't set the trim on the July 15th meeting, we will need to hold another special meeting to do so, because it has to happen before August the 3rd in accordance with the trim guidelines. So just to recap that, in case you didn't hear, we'll be setting trim rates. The plan is at your July 15 regular scheduled meeting. There will not be a workshop on that day, but at your regular one and only meeting in July, we'd like to set the trim rates. With that, we'll go into today's workshop. This is a schedule from the last meeting we had, just an overview again of the current budget we have, an $89 million general fund budget, 75%. This is revenues. Everybody keep in mind, when you're talking revenues and expenditures, those are the two main pieces of the budget. The property valuation, that's a key point I'd like to talk to you about today. We knew at the last workshop that the property appraiser was anticipating around a $9 billion valuation, which is above last year. He delivered his estimated valuation on Friday as well, and it was $9.05 billion, so a little bit more, which is good. And this is just a historical trend of where property values have been and where we're at today in billions. This slide, at the last meeting, I presented to you the FY19 final millage rates. What I've dropped in is another column to show you our goal as we prepared this budget is to reduce the general fund millage rate by 1/10 of a mil. You'll see that there. I just also wanted to lay out, in addition to our general fund operating millage rate, we have the environmentally sensitive lands, or ESL rate, which was voted into place as up to 0.25 mils. We have levied the 0.25 mils in just about every year, and they've always been needed for debt service in recent history. Current year being the first year that we didn't need the full millage, and I'll point to that. These are the two debt services down here. This is an operating millage rate here. And for fiscal 19, we didn't need the full 0.25 mils for debt service. We were able to shift some of that to go into a special revenue fund to purchase environmentally sensitive lands. And for next year, I'm anticipating, or for fiscal year 20, the one we're working on, that we'll need a little bit less for debt service, and we can increase the amount of ESL millage going to that special revenue fund. Again, the full 0.25 mils is being used for environmentally sensitive lands. It does not go into the general fund. But I just wanted to show you that there. There's no overall change, even though the pieces are changing. The other change we do have is in our GO bonds, general obligation bonds, that were issued for the Justice Center. Reserves have built up in that debt service fund due to the property valuation increases, and we will be able to reduce that millage rate from the 0.2450 to a 0.2050. It's 0.04 of a mil. It's about $350,000 there, but it's a reduction in overall millage. So our goal is to reduce the millage rate from the current 8.7247 to an 8.5847. How much longer?
Yeah.
Well, as you can see, this 2009 debt service, is that what you're going to say? How much longer on
the
GO?
Justice Center.
On the Justice Center?
Yeah.
I'd have to check that. We
Okay,
recently refinanced it. I want to say it's at least a decade,
Okay.
or else it would be on my radar, but we'll check that and get it right back to you. Moving on to the next slide. This is a new slide we prepared for today, and I kind of wanted to walk you through the guidance of the board has been for Flagler County to live on new construction and property valuation increases, and to not anticipate increasing the millage rate. In fact, there's a desire to decrease the millage rate. So we showed a little bit about new construction last time, the history of new construction. And what this slide does is shows you for the last 4 years what we've done, what the experience has been with new construction in the yellow here, and property valuation increases in the blue. And then, of course, a piece of the puzzle is what we do with the millage rate. So you can see in fiscal 16, we reduced the millage rate that year, a couple $100,000. We had new construction just under $1 million. Property valuations increased such that we generated $2.5 million. The next year, we increased the millage rate, bringing in $1.2 million. These are your new construction and property valuation increases. Again, the next year, we didn't do anything with the millage. It stayed flat, but we had new construction and property valuation increase. And fiscal 19, the current year that we're in, we did increase the millage rate last year, just over 1/10 of a mil. And we had property valuation and new construction generating new revenues. And for next year, fiscal 20, what we're working on, in order to reduce the 1/10 of a mil at at the $9,050 million estimated property valuation provided by the property appraiser. That would be a reduction in value of $859,000. We've got new construction still estimated at about $1.8 million, and then property values, of course, increasing is generating the 2.4. So together, this 4.2 million, sorry, between these two, but then, of course, decreasing the millage rate brings us down to a $3.4 million in new revenue to be shared on the general fund. So with that, I'll go to the next slide, which is an overview of expenditures. The last pie I showed you was a revenues chart. This is expenditures. It totals the same $89 million, but as you can see, the general fund is split up between the Board of County Commissioners departments, which is general services. The next slide will go into that. And then we've got our constitutionals over here representing about 40% of the budget. Reserves are in there, with the BOCC representing 54% of the current year budget. So that $3.4 million is shared, needs to be spread among these departments. The next slide just took that 54% plus the reserves and shows you what things are in the BOCC departments. We talked about how community services, general services, and emergency services are primarily your services to the community. You've got administration in this section. The non-departmental are things that don't fit with any department. That is your audit fees. There's outside agency fundings that happen through the general fund in here as well, and insurance, of course, reserves. I think the next slide, we pull out reserves and we're just focused on the expenditures of the general fund for BOCC. This is the area that myself and all the departments of the county have been working on this side. Of course, the sheriff's been working on his budget, the clerk's been working on his budget, supervisor, and so on. So this is the current year breakdown of expenditures for the BOCC. And we talked about an anticipation of personal services increases. Operations, we worked on, there was actually a decrease for this year. There's a combination of reasons there. Capital's also decreased, but it's not a function of necessarily doing less. I'll explain that in a moment. For FY20, this is what we're expecting our pie to look more like based on the current status of the budget. Personal services is growing, $1.3 million. Operating is reduced. Capital is reduced. I believe grants were reduced. And then debt service has increased a small amount for the new 5-year note that we had for the ERP, first year of the ERP. So I want to talk about the increases of BOCC, because that's the part I know very well and I've been working on since we last met. Essentially, of the $1.3 million, about $300,000 of it was related to the FY19 increases because we held that in reserves while we were going through the salary adjustments. So when we broke down to look at why our salaries are increasing the almost $1 million, a portion of that was related to partially funded positions in the current year. We know that it's going to take another $124,000 new dollars in next year's budget to fund those positions for a full year over last year's. Everything we talk about is change over the last year's budget, essentially. The 2.2% COLA for, this is the non-union portion of the general fund employees. We were not able to break that out for the union or firefighters because it's included in their negotiated increases that were part of the union contract last year. And then, of course, we had a salary study and there were adjustments made to non-union employees as well.
Lori,
So, yes, sir.
where does it show up like this? We approved a new position today.
At the very end.
Okay.
We
All right.
kind of knew that was on the horizon. We're
Right.
prepared for it, and I'll show you that number in the end. So, of course, the new position approved today and the new position approved at the last meeting
Right.
will be in the budget. We're accounting for that. But it's not in these numbers that I'm
Okay.
showing you here.
Thank you.
But I will say, Commissioner O'Brien brought out a good point. If we got a $20 million budget, a 2.2% increase should be roughly $500,000, and that's absolutely correct if we were just dealing with the COLA increase. So if you put that into perspective, we got $1 million of increase in personal services. About $500,000 would be a 2.2% increase. The other half is additional increases. With that, the other big increase that we need to look at for the FY20, that's also, let me just back up there and say, we're in year 2 of 3 of the study, the salary study alignment that was done last year. So we'll have a small amount you can anticipate in 21. And you're in year 2 of 2 for your contract, your union negotiations. So we should not see this type of increase for fiscal year 21, but it is a hit you're taking for the fiscal year 20 budget. Another big endeavor of Flagler County is the Public Safety Communications Network. And we did have an increase in the fiscal year 19 budget. But we can see that for the fiscal year 20 budget, we need an additional $360,000 to fund. There's a special revenue fund set up for this new network, and the general fund portion that needs to be contributed will have to increase at least the $360,000. As it's projected, we've also laid out for you the future hits to the general fund, if you will. So we see a big hit coming in fiscal year 21 that we'll need to be prepared for, but we should have, like I said, personal services should level off for next year, giving us some room for that. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question on that. This is the 800 megahertz system that's going in?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have a system that is currently working and finished being paid for. Does that, in other words, it would seem like it shouldn't keep going up for additional contribution if we're going to stop paying for the old system.
Right. The old system, the last payment is due in October, if I remember, of 2019. So we have one more payment for fiscal year 20, and then we won't have an additional payment in 21. We will be done with that debt service.
Okay, but this is going up significantly anyway.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Well, yes, it is. And we should have the savings and the general fund related to that debt service should offset that, and it has been about $500,000. And the loan that we took out, let's see, yes, the loan that we took out to fund, I don't know if you remember, but we took out a loan for the contract with Motorola to implement what's being worked on right now. And that loan was scheduled to start off small and increase after the old 800 megahertz, if you will, is paid off. So that will help. But and that loan is being paid out of that special revenue fund. Okay, think about it this way. The general fund has to kick into the special revenue fund just like the other municipalities that are participating in the program contribute. So everyone contributes to the special revenue fund, and the debt service is paid from there. So you're right, general fund will be freed up. It's about a $400,000, so those should net to zero. Beginning in fiscal 21. So we'll have a $400,000 decrease in the fiscal year 21 budget, and so that should net to only a $200,000 increase.
I can't help that. This brings up old thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Did Palm Coast ever pay their contribution that they owed us?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, and that project's moving along very well, I understand, and I'm sure you'll be getting your update on that. But from a financial perspective, it's really coming together for us. And we just wanted to point out the fiscal year 20 impact. And as things get clearer, once we get in there, these numbers may change a little bit, but it shouldn't much. And you're right. I guess the decrease of the $400,000 would offset the 21 hit, almost all of the 22 hit, and then 23 looks like a great year. And then 24, maybe we'll see some savings there that we can put to some other use. But these are the projections that have been provided so far for what's necessary in that special revenue fund. With that, so what I've tried to describe to you now is this $1.8 million. This is the increase that we see for the Board of County Commissioners budget. I explained that about $1 million of it is related to salaries increases. There's about $400,000 related to the new communications network for next year. Sorry. And then there we had an additional $100,000 for the medical examiners. Budget is going up. There was another $100,000 for tax commissions. As we generate more revenue, it costs more to collect it. That got us up to about 1.6. And then I got a couple $100,000 more in for the new positions that you've seen lately. So we're looking at a $1.8 million increase. The sheriff submitted his budget on Friday. You've received a hard copy of his report. His request for increase is $2.2 million for next year. The supervisor of elections also submitted her budget on Friday as well. You received that one electronically. Her increase is $500,000. And the clerk also submitted his budget on Friday, and it's a couple $100,000 more. You also received that one today, if I'm not mistaken, electronically. So the total increases are $4.7 million over the current year. The new revenues we talked about is $3.4 million. So my difference is $1.3 million. I've spoken with the county administrator, and he did mention that we will be working with the constitutionals to help us bridge this gap so that when we come back to you on June 17th, we'll have either some recommendations or answers for you on how it's been closed in an effort to keep that tenth of a mil reduced.
Is that new revenue include the 9.1, what the tax assessor said last Friday?
Yes, sir.
Does that 3.4 include that?
Yes. Are you talking about the additional $50 million in valuation?
Yeah. In other words,
Yes.
the 3.4 includes the latest tax assessor's
Yes,
number.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Our estimates were around $3 million, so it gave us an additional 0.4 to work with there. We're very happy. And his final number may come in, we'll get that on July 1. His final number may come in a little bit higher than that, which would help bridge the gap, but I don't think we can wait till July 1 in hopes of that. We really need to kind of have solved that answer by July 1, I would expect. Because, again, we're bringing you a proposed budget on July 15, and hopefully set the trim rates at that point. Any other questions about where we're at with the general fund budget today?
I feel very confident that with us working together, we're going to take care of that 1.3, no problem.
Okay. Then thank.
Laura, a couple things that have come up recently. The helicopter, we need to have a discussion about that, where we're going to go with that. Mr. Cameron, I don't see a need to put on another pilot, but I don't know what your long-term goal is in the use of our helicopter, but if we're going to go towards a 24-hour helicopter, then we need to budget for it. So,
I don't think that it's practical to do that.
I don't
in this
either.
coming
I don't either.
budget year. It's certainly a goal that we want to pursue, but as we go through the fire department's needs, this one would not be at the highest point. The chief has some substantially greater challenges than a 24-hour service.
all right. What about the issue of buying a new helicopter? Do we have
Well,
that
yeah,
on
that-
do we have that on the long-range plan somewhere?
That you don't have a sinking fund for that, and that's going to be a significant hit when it comes. They're not cheap, but that helicopter is getting toward the end of its life, and helicopters are not something that you can extend a great deal beyond that
I know that
in
well,
safety. They tend to have the aerodynamics of a rock if you have a failure, and we certainly want to, if we're going to have a helicopter and helicopter service, we want to have something that will both fill our needs and do it safely.
There's a way to lease those. I know we do some of the helicopters for the hospital in Georgia. You can do a long-term, you can lease and then at the end purchase it and makes it a lot more affordable.
Well, that may be a possibility, and now that we have got the deck cleared on a lot of these other issues, we're going to be able to turn our attention to fire service planning, and we plan to be very aggressive with that in the next few months.
Usually if you purchase it, the engine will wear out and it really isn't worth anything. I mean, it's more of an ego thing. It's becoming more and more efficient to do these leasing with the engines.
I just point out that drones are doing fantastic things now for observation and things like that. And you could get a lot of drone coverage for what a second helicopter would cost.
Well, we're being very aggressive in the drone program. And we recognize that the future and a lot of things for fire safety, particularly forest fire, those kinds
really
of
good for that
things.
kind
That this is a good alternative, but at the end of the day, the helicopter service has served Flagler County very well. There are counties directly around us that are a little bit envious, but we wouldn't want to discontinue that. But I agree, we don't want to look at more than one right now.
What about the tax collector and the property appraiser? We're not anticipating very much there.
Point, thank you for mentioning that. The property appraiser has a reduced budget for next year. It wasn't, I didn't have the impact here because it wasn't significant to our balancing.
Reduced, right? You said
Yes, sir.
reduced, right?
It is
Yeah,
reduced.
yeah,
The
good
property
word.
appraiser's budget was reduced.
Just asking, just
That-
clarifying.
That has made him one of my favorite constitutional officers.
The right word.
I do want to commend the appraiser and the clerk of courts on keeping it so low. Tom, good job on that. I'm not familiar with how these budgets, if it is compared to last year, but it looks good compared to the others. So, from what I understand, it's pretty good.
And the
Pretty
tax
good. So thank you.
collectors increase because her budget, as far as we're concerned, is what we pay her for collections, and it's included in our 1.8 million. Her increase is expected to be 85,000, depending on where the valuation ends up exactly. We're required to pay her for collecting the taxes for the BOCC and the school board. So I need to get with them and see what their millage is doing, run that calculation, but it will be an increase, but it's included in the 1.8 million.
One last thing, in the budget workshops last year, we agreed to look at expanding the tourist development budget to include an expansion more into the music and arts fields, and I'd like to see that reflected in this year's budget, whether that's a new person or whether that's a new budget line for them or something. But it was something we agreed to last year to look at this year, so I'd like to see that manifest itself somewhere.
I drove up to St. Augustine a couple of days ago, and I saw a real nice idea right up just before you got to the bridge that went east. There was a combined police, sheriff, and firehouse. Man, that looked pretty, real pretty, and it jingled of a savings.
Yes, that was the last station that I participated in before I left. It wasn't built, but it was planned out, and
Is it the Jerry Cameron Memorial Building?
Not memorial, no.
Not Memorial.
God, I hope not.
but we're kind of proud of that one. And if you go inside of it, you'll be real proud. It's a great facility.
A lot better than all the car dealerships up on that part of the road there. But I mean, it just stood out and just said, "Hey, here, putting the two of them together was a good idea."
Is this information now on our website?
But the PowerPoint presentation, it can be. Would you like it on the website?
Yeah,
Okay. Will do.
because we don't have a copy of it, and I'd like. to be
And
able
I
to
just
look at it.
memory.
I just prepared this slide that you're looking at right now this morning, based
Yeah,
on the.
that's fine.
I'll make sure it's on the website.
Thank you.
Still wet.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the public, maybe even some of us, fully appreciate the challenge of putting together a budget like this, particularly with the parts still moving while you were putting it together. Laurie is done a fantastic job, and we really appreciate her dedication to doing this. She's working all kinds of hours, and everybody has to give her a wide berth until she finishes this.
Anything else on the presentation?
I will say the two things we know of, because we're constantly looking for what have we missed, what else is out there. I do know the ADA is something that we need to make sure we've covered in the budget. That's something I know is being worked on now. We don't have definitive numbers to include it, and not sure if it can be absorbed. Maybe a portion of it is in there. So we're working on that. And there was a Senate bill that was passed related to firefighters pre-existing conditions, where the numbers are still being developed on that. It's unable to be determined what the impact, or if there will be an impact to us related to that. But just know those are out there.
Did we get anything from FRS? I mean, that's a pretty big expense to us here, funding that retirement plan.
Yes, sir. And those retirement rates did inch up. It was very nominal this year
Okay.
compared
Hooray.
to some
Yeah.
years.
Okay.
It was a very small increase compared to what we've seen.
Okay.
Should have been, the market went up.
If we don't have any more questions, I would, I know it's not, well, I'm going to ask for public comment, but I was wondering if either Mr. Bexley or Chief want to talk, or you guys okay? No? Okay, that's fine. So I'll open it up to public comment. Any public comment on, for our workshop today? Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Tammy Santa. I'm the Finance Director at the Family Life Center. Thank you for allowing us to take part today. Just want to thank you for all that you continue to do for the Family Life Center, and let you know that we do appreciate the challenges that you are facing with the coming year's budget. However, we do ask that you continue to keep the Family Life Center in mind when making budgetary decisions. As with the county, we also face increasing costs, increasing number of victims seeking services, and just ask for your continued consideration in helping us to meet those needs for the victims here in Flagler County. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you, Tammy. Thank you for coming, and thank you for all you all do
Yeah.
for us. Okay? Yes, sir. Anything else?
I'm on that board.
Okay, if not, I'll entertain a motion for us to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Very good.